معاك ويقول لك
الحمد لله.
يقول بالسر ويقول لك الحمد لله.
Yes. Both ways are correct. Yeah, he's asking some people to start their recitation in the Quran, in their salah, in their prayer. You hear some imams starting Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Some of them starting immediately Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. But those who start with Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, they say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim secretly, silently. You cannot start without mentioning Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You cannot leave it out, because also a very valid opinion is that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is an ayah of the Fatiha. And that's a big problem if you miss on Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And some of the qira'at, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is an ayah. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught it this way and taught it that way. So both ways are fine. Both ways are fine. Now, yesterday we started reading in the chapter that talks about al-kaba'ir wa akbaruha, the major sins, and we talked about the fact that the sins are divided into major and minor. Now, how do we know the major sins? Scholars started giving definitions of what could be considered as a major sin, and what's the difference between the two. Such as they say that if a sin is called kabira, ألا أنبئكم بأكبر الكبائر. Some hadith mention clearly that this is a kabira, so we know it's a major sin. The hadith we read before, أي ذنب أعظم, which is the worst and most awful of sins, أن تجعل الله ندا وهو خلقك، أن تقتل ولدك مخافة أن يطعم معك، أن تزاني بحليل جارك. So he mentioned some major sins here, such as zina, adultery, and killing, and so on. So sometimes the hadith itself will tell you that this is a major sin. Another way of knowing the major sins is that if Allah indicated that He has cursed people who do such a sin. So because cursing is to deprive and distance the person from the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. Or if Allah warned and threatened that whoever does this will be thrown into the fire of hell, that also indicates it is a major sin. Or if it is said that whoever does this sin is not a believer, لا يؤمن, or it's called a fasiq, سباب المسلم فسوق وقتاله كفر, or if it is labeled as kufr, labeling it as kufr could indicate it is definitely an indication it's a major sin or a real kufr. Could be this or that, and we talked about you have to look at the context and know exactly does that text mean the actual kufr and apostasy, or does it mean a grave sin? So if it is described as fusuq or kufr or la'an, Allah cursed the person who does that, or threatened him with the fire of hell, all these are signs that this is a major sin. Or also, if there is a punishment, a prescribed punishment for that sin, such as zina, there's a prescribed punishment. There's a prescribed punishment for killing, right? For stealing. Those things that require a prescribed punishment in this life according to the law of Allah are also signs that these are major sins. But they're not limited to that, and that's why some scholars counted the major sins. Some said there's 70, some people said there's 700, they counted. Some people counted as much as 700 different acts that could be considered as major sins. And some of them said that if we look at the hadith of the kaba'ir, which maybe will come here soon, سئل عن الكبائر قال الشرك بالله وعقوق الوالدين. Prophet ﷺ was asked السبع الموبقات, or he said, I will tell you about the 7 sins that would cause the person to perish. So these are major sins, we know. So if we look at the texts that clearly say that those are major sins, and we see the impact of those sins and the harm and damage they cause, then we can compare other sins to them. If the other sins can have the same impact or damage or have the same kind of meaning, that also indicates that these other sins are also major sins. Now, sometimes a sin can become major although it is originally a minor sin. That's a very important point. They say, for instance, to insist on performing the same sin repeatedly, carelessly, This is إصرار. That's why they say لا صغيرة مع إصرار ولا كبيرة مع استغفار. The minor sin will not remain a minor sin if a person carelessly and repeatedly does it without thinking about it, although he knows it's a sin. That then will make it magnified, while a major sin can be diminished by istighfar, feeling sorrow, feeling sorry, trying to correct, and and repenting from it. That of course will wipe it away, or diminish it, or even wipe it away completely. So that's a very important point as well.
Things like riba, hazard, namima.
Yes.
Under what classification can someone put them?
Yes. Ghiba and namima probably would fall under the major sins, because if you look at if you collect all the texts, you will find very strong threats related to these sins. When Aisha one time radiallahu anha, a woman came to ask the Prophet ﷺ about a question, and then she left, and then Sayyidah Aisha said something that she thought was trivial. She said, "This woman is so short," and he said to her, "Wallahi laqad qulti kalima law muzijat bima al-bahr lamazajathu." He says, "You have said a word. It is so awful that if you throw it into the sea, it will spoil the water of the sea." For instance, something like that. Probably you'll find people differing in opinion about sins, the classification of sins. Like people went from 7 up to 700, and there's many books that people authored trying to enumerate the major sins. Now, anyhow, this is just an introduction. Inshallah, we will go through them, through the ahadith next time, inshallah.